So that first step, the acknowledgement of the loss and the grief, that's not been done very much in disaster recovery prior to this, correct?
No, and this method was designed in part with a set of psychologists that were looking at human nature and human behavior in critical events. If what we need to get to in order to empower people is a sense that they feel safe where they are and with whom they're talking to, that they have a voice and are serious partners to the process, how do we create a method or a process in which that can quickly unfold and occur?
Right. And being authentic as that point of communication, to me, was so critical, because we were in Arkansas, which is my ancestral home, and I was trying to connect with everyone and saying, oh, go Razorbacks. And you were sitting there saying, I'm Dr. Laura Olson, I'm from Minnesota. And people respected that. And they began to trust immediately that you were who you said you were. I think that is as important as any part of that methodology. And I think sometimes we try too hard to identify with the people that we're with instead of allowing them to identify their loss and their grief. And it was a tremendous experience, and I want to thank you again for that. Moving on to a broader scale, what do you see in the whole movement of disaster recovery, resilience, all of that globally, especially given everything that's happening in our world today, increasing numbers of disasters, increasing problems financially with many places around the world? What do you see happening?
Well, the trends are not, they're disturbing, right? We obviously all have identified a greater frequency of these events, greater intensity of them, so the destruction is worse and the impact's worse. And so we have a different set of communities in the international sphere, and I'll speak from my other job, which is working with the United Nations on these issues internationally. We have three communities: the climate change adaptation community, we have a disaster risk reduction community, and then we have a disaster recovery community. And all three of them function separately and are not communicating well with one another, although we're all realizing that there's overlaps in these areas and that they're going to need to come together if we're actually going to achieve some of our goals. We have a new set of frameworks in place, the Sendai Framework for disaster risk reduction. Right. It is widely considered to be a large step back from the Hyoga Framework for Action because it's too all-encompassing. Maybe we were too inclusive in this process, so we kind of lost our goals along the way. So I'm about to head to the Cancun meeting, the Global Platform on Disaster Risk Reduction, and think exactly about these issues and talk to others trying to implement in the field about these issues. How do we raise greater awareness? The truth is, again, if we come back to our vulnerable populations, if we're very, very honest about what their priorities are, they are not climate change adaptation, they are not disaster risk reduction, and they are not, until an event occurs, recovery. They are focused on the day-to-day difficulties they have in surviving.
Yeah.
Economic survival is what motivates people. When we look at a floodplain, we say, oh, what a dangerous place to live, or the slope of a mountain face, and they see fertile land and we see landslide danger. So, I mean, the ways of looking at the map or geographies are very different from a person, living a normal life and a disaster risk reduction professional. And we need to become more honest and more realistic about how to understand how people are making choices to live where they are. they're economically motivated choices, and they make sense for many of them because their means require them to live in dangerous situations.
How can we do that, though? How can we bring these different groups together and allow them to begin to communicate with each other in a meaningful way?
Well, I think events themselves are going to force that on us. We're already starting to see overlaps that some of the DRR community is integrating with the climate change adaptation community. There's resistance to this. I think it'll be a process of the next 2 decades, kind of bringing many groups together and bringing into the international development sphere a strong realization that disasters are the one thing that are knocking us back from every advance we make.